As tensions in the Middle East escalate, households' budgets are set to feel the flow-on effects due to the ongoing conflict.
I told them to do the deal. They should have done the deal. Their cities have been blown to pieces. They've lost a lot of people. They should have done the deal. I told them, do the deal. So I don't know. I'm not too much in the mood to negotiate now.
Just 2 days after Israel bombed Iranian nuclear sites, oil prices shot up nearly 13%, hitting close to $80 a barrel, the biggest spike we've seen in over a year. But here's the real problem. Iran is now threatening to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water that carries almost 20% of the world's oil. If that happens, this won't just be about higher prices at the pump. It'll be about no gas at all. Most gas stations in the US only have enough fuel to last 2 or 3 days. Our whole system, from refineries to delivery trucks, runs on razor-thin margin. If those oil tankers stop, gas stations across the country could run dry in less than 72 hours. That's not fear-mongering. That's the math. This isn't just some crisis happening halfway around the world.
If the US does get more involved, Iran is already warning it could cause chaos in global oil.
It's one that could hit your morning commute, your grocery bill, and your family's bottom line, and it's moving faster than anyone expected. The United States consumes around 20 million barrels of oil every single day, yet imports account for nearly 8 million of those barrels, a stunning dependence for a country that prides itself on energy security. But the real danger isn't just how much we import, it's how fragile our system is if even one global artery gets cut. Right now, all eyes are on the Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly 20% of the world's oil supply flows daily. If Iran makes good on its threat to shut it down, the US doesn't have a backup plan, just a short fuse. Take the Strategic Petroleum Reserve (SPR), once a reliable cushion in times of crisis. It's been drained to just 395 million barrels, barely 56% of its full capacity. At current consumption levels, that might cover between 19 to 47 days, but that's assuming no logistical issues, no refinery bottlenecks, and no panic buying. In reality, refineries operate near capacity, fuel deliveries run on razor-thin margins, and most gas stations only stock 2-3 days worth of fuel. There's no room for error and no time for delay. Experts from national security circles are sounding alarms if prices spike to $150 or worse. $200, $300 per barrel, the entire energy infrastructure could seize up. Not just oil companies, the trucking industry collapses, airlines cancel flights, agriculture halts, and shelves go empty. This isn't just about filling up your tank. This is about how food gets to your table, how medicine reaches your pharmacy, how power grids stay online. The bottom line, we've built an economy that runs on oil and assumes it will always be cheap, abundant, and on time. That assumption is now hanging by a thread, and America isn't ready. As missiles fly over the Middle East, Iran be preparing to unleash a different kind of weapon, one that doesn't involve warheads but could trigger global economic chaos. Lawmakers in Tehran are now openly debating the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow 21-mile waterway that quietly carries 1/5 of the world's oil supply. It's a move some analysts are calling the economic nuclear option. Why? Because it doesn't take an army to bring the global economy to its knees. Just a few mines, fast attack boats, or even the threat of closure is enough. Already, regional leaders are warning the US to take the threat seriously. Iraq's foreign minister recently stated that oil could spike to $200 or even $300 per barrel if the strait is shut for just a few days. That's not a forecast, that's a flashing red alarm. For context, oil was trading at around $75 or $80 in early June. A sudden quadrupling of prices would slam every supply chain tied to fossil fuels, from gas pumps to grocery aisles. And this time, Iran doesn't need to sink ships or fire missiles. If shipping insurers pull coverage as they did during past tensions, tankers won't sail. That alone could choke off the flow of millions of barrels per day, creating a real-world fuel shortage overnight. This is asymmetric warfare at its most dangerous. No battlefield, no declaration of war, just silence in the strait, and a ripple effect that could collapse the fragile balance of America's energy lifeline.
A threat would be a partial blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. I don't think a complete blockade is possible, but certainly a partial blockade. And I'm expecting to see a slowdown in the number of tankers transiting the strait just because of the conflict. Since President Trump has taken office, the price has come down from about $80 a barrel to the low 50s.
Iran knows the U.S. runs on oil, and if the Strait of Hormuz closes, it won't just be energy price spike, it'll be panic. This isn't just about gas prices going up, it's about the American way of life being shaken at its core. If oil hits $200 to $300 a barrel, filling a standard SUV could cost $400 to $500, a number so high that many Americans won't even be able to pay at the pump because most credit cards have transaction limits. That's not speculation, that's math. And when truckers can't afford diesel, they park their rigs. That alone could paralyze the country's supply chains within days. Delivery giants like FedEx and UPS are already warning about potential route suspensions if fuel costs spike. Grocery store shelves would begin to empty, not because there's no food, but because there's no way to move it. Hospitals could start rationing emergency vehicle use or even delay critical treatments due to fuel shortages. Police and fire departments, already stretched thin in many cities, may have to cut back on patrols and emergency response times. The danger goes beyond inconvenience. The U.S. operates on a razor-thin, just-in-time fuel and supply model. Most gas stations have only 48 to 72 hours of fuel on hand, and once word spreads that supplies are running low, panic kicks in. People top off their tanks daily, hoard fuel in containers, and flood social media with footage of long lines, creating a feedback loop of fear that accelerates shortages. This isn't a future threat, it's a current vulnerability. From suburban commuters to small-town farmers, from delivery drivers to first responders, everyone will feel it. And once the system buckles, it's not easily repaired. It's not about the price of gas anymore, it's about whether there will be any gas at all. That's the terrifying possibility Americans could be waking up to if this crisis in the Strait of Hormuz escalates.
I told them to do the deal. They should have done the deal. The cities have been blown to pieces. They've lost a lot of people. They should have done the deal. I told them, do the deal. So I don't know.
At this year's G7 summit in Alberta, the symbolism couldn't have been clearer. President Trump left the summit early, skipping key energy and trade discussions. Meanwhile, Canada's Mark Carney stayed and quickly became the focal point. European leaders like Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen didn't wait for Washington to return. Instead, they huddled with Carney to map out a new approach to global energy cooperation without the U.S. at the table. Behind closed doors, the shift was even starker. Canada's parliament quietly announced it would halt support for a major U.S. LNG export project unless Washington rolls back its steel tariffs. That's no small deal. It puts billions in transatlantic energy trade on ice. The message from Ottawa: the era of one-sided partnerships is over. A Canadian spokesperson put it bluntly on national television: "We can't build bridges if America keeps burning them." This isn't just about one summit or one pipeline. It's a pattern. From trade to energy to security, traditional allies are signaling that they no longer see the U.S. as a dependable partner. Trump's go-it-alone policies, tariffs, walkouts, and public rebukes may play well at home. But abroad, they're eroding trust, weakening alliances, and pushing allies to explore new coalitions that don't center around America. The question now is chilling. If even Canada, America's most integrated and cooperative ally, is willing to walk away, who's next? And can the U.S. regain its seat at the table before it finds itself completely on the outside looking in? Inside Washington, the alarms are no longer just blinking, they're screaming. But many now fear those warnings are coming far too late. National security analysts from the Strategic National Security Office (SNS) have issued urgent internal assessments warning that the United States is dangerously underprepared for the consequences of a total disruption in oil flow through the Strait of Hormuz. With tensions between Israel and Iran escalating, the possibility of Iran closing this critical choke point is no longer seen as theoretical. It's a live risk, and one the U.S. might not be able to withstand. The first point of failure: the Strategic Petroleum Reserve (SPR). While it sounds like a national safeguard, the reality is sobering. At roughly 395 million barrels, the SPR sits at nearly 40% below its full capacity. According to internal simulations shared with the National Security Council, that stockpile would barely cover 19 to 47 days of national oil consumption under emergency conditions. But even that window assumes everything goes right. Flawless logistics, no hoarding, no natural disasters, and no major supply chain sabotage. If panic sets in, that timeline shrinks fast. And it's not just the quantity of oil, it's the infrastructure to move it. America's refining and distribution network are already operating at razor-thin margins, simply wasn't built to handle a sudden, prolonged global shock. This fragility isn't a secret. It's a known vulnerability that's now being acknowledged at the highest levels. Reports from the Atlantic Council and Barron's reveal that U.S. economic resilience depends on a just-in-time system that is efficient in times of peace, but brittle in times of stress. The entire structure of fuel distribution from Gulf Coast refineries to rural gas stations is built around assumptions of steady imports, cheap energy, and functional trade routes. Disrupt any part of that, and particularly the Strait of Hormuz, which moves 20% of global oil, and the system doesn't bend. It breaks. Within D.C., a classified briefing delivered to the National Security Council summed up the stakes in one stark line. We are not ready, not for $200 oil, not for fuel rationing, and not for a public backlash when the pumps run dry. The concern isn't limited to economics. The military depends heavily on fossil fuels to keep operations running. So do emergency services, hospitals, airports, and municipal systems. When the fuel dries up, so does the machinery of modern life. And beyond the logistical nightmare looms an even more unsettling threat, a crisis of confidence. If the U.S., the world's largest economy and self-proclaimed global leader, can't manage a foreseeable fuel shock, what message does that send to its allies? What leverage remains in future negotiations if even America's domestic infrastructure crumbles under pressure? This isn't alarmism, it's the dominant mood inside the Situation Room. Multiple policy advisors are now recommending immediate diplomatic engagement to de-escalate tensions in the Strait, emergency SPR release plans, and even federal intervention in fuel logistics if the crisis worsens. But the clock is ticking, and Washington is running out of time options and credibility. This is bigger than gas prices. It's about how fragile daily life in America has become and how quickly it could all unravel. If the Strait of Hormuz shuts down, we're not just looking at higher costs. We're looking at a nation stalled by fuel shortages, delivery breakdowns, and economic chaos. So, here's the real question. Do we release more from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and hope it buys time? Or do we face reality and engage diplomatically even with adversaries to prevent a total shutdown of the global oil artery? What do you think? Should the U.S. act now or risk everything? Drop your opinion in the comments. SPR release versus diplomacy. Share this with someone who drives to work, runs a small business, or relies on deliveries because this crisis affects all of us. Subscribe for fast updates as this situation unfolds, because if we wait for the gas stations to run dry, it's already too late.